What about that Duramax swap, Car Wizard? Where are we at with that? Well, today I got some exciting news. Some things have started to show up. We're going to take a look at some of the updates. Let's get started. So it's been a while since we've done a Duramax update. I've been doing some waiting on some parts. I ordered some things and some solutions to some of the problems I was having, and I got told it's 4 or 5 week wait. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. But no matter how easy the swap is going to be or how easy you think it's going to be, it never goes as planned. Even with something that should be bolt-in, there's going to be things you're going to have to change here or there. Luckily, I don't have to majorly modify anything on this vehicle. But thinking about modifying pieces and parts and things, especially those lug nuts that are down there, you see some are missing. Make sure to check out Mrs. Wizard's auction she's got going on. There's links in the description below. A lot of the car parts we have in the shop, when we're done with them, Mrs. Wizard is using her artistic abilities to make really cool sculptures and lamps and all kinds of things, and earrings. Make sure to check that out before you go. So, we got a lot to cover today, guys. So much information. Are you guys ready? Let's get started on that. Well, since it's almost Halloween, I guess this looks kind of grotesque. It looks like someone's been disemboweled here, Mrs. Wizard. That is awfully messy. I will have to go through all that. That's actually the harness that goes to the truck, not to the engine. But there's going to be a lot of things I'm still going to use, and a lot of stuff just be cut off. I'm not even going to use it. We have a lot of stuff to cover today, a lot of updates. I've been waiting on some parts. And I actually hit a couple snags where I was really moving along really well, and there's a couple of things I needed to do, and when I contacted suppliers, they said, sure, we can help you. It's going to be 5 weeks of waiting, though. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's going to really slow me down. But what do? There's not much you can do about it, so let's go ahead and show you guys some of the updates I have. So there's some things underneath the engine I want to show you, and actually in the engine bay or down below. So I'll go ahead and jack this thing off up here. Right, up, up. Up, up, jack it up, sorry. So I mentioned in a previous video about this Duramax swap that I'm going to have to change out some things with the oil pan. So I have removed the lower oil pan because it was really close to a cross member that's down underneath of it. Actually, it was just touching it, and I really don't like that. I actually have a supplier who has a custom Duramax swap oil pan, as in this picture here. That's what it looks like. And when you compare it to the stock oil pan, which is in this picture, the depth of it is like half as much, and it saves so much room. It was kind of expensive, but it is the best way to move forward with this. Also, if you'll take a look here, I took off the stock motor mounts. Although they would work, I want to be able to adjust and to really move this thing exactly where I want it. So I've got these guys here that will go on. I can weld these to the perches. Not only can I basically put these wherever I want it, I can move the engine forward or back a good couple 3 inches. So that's going to help me once I get the radiator installed. If I'm like, oh, I'm awfully close, a half an inch, if I could just move it a half an inch, no problem. These slide back easily. I can move it exactly where I want it, where I can be sure everything clears. So I've actually had the engine setting in there. I just pulled it out, as you saw. Right here, the oil filter housing was something I was concerned about. Once I was test fitting it, I found out it'll be no problem. I got the oil filter off because I'm removing the engine. But once it's in place, you can see there's an actual divot in the firewall where it fits perfectly. It will not contact anything. So luckily that's not going to be a problem. All those things I'm talking about here is why you have to test fit your engine. You can't just bolt it in and be done. One of the things about an engine swap when you're doing one is you have to realize you're going to be putting the engine in and pulling it out at least 40 times. You're going to put it in, so okay, I need to move this, take it back out. Put it back in, okay, I need to change this. The wiring harnesses are going to go here. There's just a huge amount of things you have to think about before you just bolt it in and call it good.
But what happens if you get one of those special kits, you know, like from Apollo 9/11?
Unfortunately, even out there online where you order kits that says bolt in, here's the parts, just do it. Even then, it's not that easy. With Apollo 911, I had to put in the engine and pull it back out at least 15 or 20 times. Granted, it does give you a lot of parts and pieces that saves a lot of time, but you still have to test fit your exhaust. You have to test fit your oil pan, you have to test fit the wiring harnesses, the fuel lines, how are you going to route coolant pipes. There's so much you have to figure out. One thing that I had to do is take off the heat shield right here, and you can see that even from the factory they have a little dent right here in the exhaust, and that allows me to clear the steering shaft. And as I've test fitted it, it fits right through here. It fits perfectly. So I'm very happy I won't have to cut or hack anything right there. The nice thing about this swap is that I'm using a like-to-like scenario. This is an early 2000s Chevy truck. This engine came out of an early 2000 Chevy truck, albeit it was 3/4 ton. This is a 1/2 ton. There are some differences, but they're very small. It's not like we're putting a Duramax into a Dodge or a Power Stroke into a Chevy. We're not doing something wild.
You mean like a Jag into a Chevelle?
Yeah, like that thing. It's not crazy. So that'll take care of my motor mounts. That'll take care of my oil pan issue once it arrives. It's already paid for. I'm hoping here in the next week I'm supposed to be getting my oil pan. Then I can exactly place this where I want it to be, weld in the motor mounts, and everything will go together that way. Before you run wiring, fuel lines, coolant hoses, all those things, you first have to locate the engine and get it hard mounted to the frame. Then you know where everything's going to go after that. So that's what I've been waiting on, is the oil pan and the motor mount issue, so I can get that solved. Let's move on over to the transmission.
Okay, Wizard, that's not the 4L Slippy there.
No, it's not a 4L Slippy, as they call it, the 4L 60, which does slip. It fails pretty easily if you are pretty hard on it. The original transmission in this truck was a 4L 60, and yes, when I bought the truck, it wouldn't go into gear. It was slipping, just like 4L Slippy, just like the description states. Would that bolt to a Duramax? Yes. Could you program it and make it work? Yes. But it probably wouldn't live very long. The amount of power the Duramax is going to put out would shred a 4L 60 in short order. So I got a 4L80E. As you can see on the bell housing, it came out of a 2000 Chevy 3500 box truck. It's in very good condition. I don't need to rebuild it or do anything crazy with it. As you can see on the side, it says 4L80. With vans and things, you could have gotten a Duramax with a 4L85. I've actually contacted a few buddies in the area that do transmission rebuilds, and I asked them, will a 4L80 even survive behind a Duramax? And they say yes, as long as you're not towing 20,000 pounds with it. When I told them I'm never going to tow anything with this truck other than hauling in the bed. I'm not going to be pulling trailers full of hay bales or anything crazy. And the guy said, well, yeah. He said, don't stand on it in fourth gear though. Don't be hard on it. Anything else will be just fine. But when you're in highway gear, don't floor it in fourth gear, and you should be just fine actually. The truck only weighs 4,500 pounds or something. It doesn't weigh very much because it's short bed, regular cab, 1/2 ton. And based on that fact, if that's all the weight that it's pulling around, it should have no trouble. And like I mentioned in the beginning of this series, I will not be tuning this engine and turning the power up. It's just stock. Stock horsepower, stock torque. It'll be right at the maximum of what this transmission can handle, but it'll still handle it and be just fine. Now, the next question is, how do you control this? Does this tie in with the computer? Does this all shifted with the Duramax computer? And I have a solution for that as well. Unbeknownst to most people, the Duramax ECM does not control transmissions. We're used to ECM, PCM being inside the same box on a Chevrolet, and usually that's the case. But with the Duramaxes, they usually came with an Allison transmission, and guess what? They had their own Allison transmission control module that was not part of the ECM. It sent data to the ECM back and forth here or there, but it had its own control module, so I'm not too worried about that. So I've got a solution from US Shift. It's a transmission controller set up specifically for an 4L80E diesel transmission. I'll show you what's in the box. So here we have the actual transmission control module. You see it has solenoid, spindle, all the different connections that it needs to run. That's it. That is the computer for this transmission. Here is the wiring harness. This end goes into the transmission itself. Then these go into the little control module. And there's several bare wires that will actually tie into the ECM from the Duramax to get data back and forth. But basically, other than needing a little bit of data here or there, this little module right here will control the transmission for me and do everything. Just like it should. Even torque converter lockup, everything. So I definitely did my research before I purchased this transmission. I talked to my local transmission buddies that rebuild transmissions professionally. And like I just mentioned, they said it will hold up just fine. But I was curious about how it will be controlled. They told me the Duramax ECM does not even control any transmissions, and it never did. I was like, well, what am I going to do? How is this going to work? He told me and actually recommended this US Shift transmission controller. It will take care of controlling everything on this transmission. It'll shift just like factory, it'll shift just fine. And that's exactly what happens on a 2005 Chevy with a Duramax. It has its own Allison transmission controller, so no issues there. Let's move on to the engine wiring and computer. I've actually had buddies come into the shop and they take a look at this, they're amazed, and they always have the same question. How are you going to make the wiring and the computer and everything be happy? It's very simple. I found a company online that takes the Duramax ECM, they go in with software and they turn off security, which is called VATS. They did a few other changes here or there that makes it happy to run by itself. It doesn't need to talk to any other computers. It doesn't even have security on it, which I'm going to be adding a separate security system. But as far as this is concerned, it will no longer need a special chip or a key or anything to start it. It'll just start right up. But that doesn't solve the wiring. When you have the original wiring harness that actually goes on the engine, there's all kinds of wires and connections that go to the body, control module, all kind of things they really don't need. And I also sent this company my harness, and they way simplified everything for me. Let me show you some of the things they did. So this is just an interface between the ECM and the engine and some of the sensors it needs. These two large connectors you see here actually are on the engine. Let's go take a look. Right here, and you can see the reddish colored one right there, orange. That's where those connect. These two large connectors here actually go into the ECM. You can see they actually will go in there. There's a few other connectors on here, but they really gone through and simplified this so much. They actually pull out the wiring that I can splice to the truck, not the engine, but the truck, and actually label it for me. Look at this, guys. Wait to start light, mill indicator, tachometer, vehicle speed sensor, four-wheel drive, which I'm not going to be having four-wheel drive, park lights, 12-volt key. Look at that, guys. Cruise control. I'll be able to use cruise control on this vehicle. There's more cruise control wiring there. And an OBD2 port. Now there's one more thing I want to show you guys. The advertisement here is to make it run, there's only a few wires to hook up, and that's it. Let's take a look at that. So this is a fuse box and a relay box. Since as far as the engine is concerned, it's not going to be using the truck's relays and things. It has its own setup now. Fuses and relays and everything in there. And here's our wires. Battery, 12 volt. Battery, 12 volt ignition. 12 volt key on. And pretty much it'll run just with that. So what is normally like pull your hair out, mind-boggling, like, oh my gosh, there's so many wires, I don't even know where to start. This company has gone through and just simplified this so much for me. I'll plug in the ECM, plug in a few things, wire in a few things, and it'll start. Now I will have to do more wiring to do my cruise control tachometer, and I'll show you guys that in a future video. But that's how I solved the computer side of the engine installation.
Okay, Wizard, so what are you going to do with that massive spaghetti there? I don't think that's going to become your lunch.
No, a lot of this was the engine harness for the LS motor, the 4.8 Vortec. I will be using probably 80% of this to tie in to the truck. We're melding two systems together, a Duramax engine with the half-ton Chevy truck. There's going to be some things that do have to be connected in. I will reuse some of this, but just like they've done on the harness behind me, like I mentioned, 80% of this is going to be cut off and removed and not used anymore. Things like NOx sensors and fuel injectors and things of that nature, I won't be using that anymore. In the bed of this truck is most of the parts I'm going to be reusing. Some of them I won't be reusing. I will be using the core support. I'll be adding my own intercooler for the turbo. I'll be using these fans and wire them into a mechanical switch. At certain temperatures they go on and off. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, if I'm going to put the cat eye grill back on or a different grill. But let me show you an upgrade or a change that I've done with the brakes. So this is the old vacuum brake booster, and we know that diesels really don't have vacuum. They do have some Duramaxes that had vacuum pumps, but this takes up a lot of room that I need to fit the engine into the area. This would be bumping into the engine if I left it. So the solution there was to put the setup that's directly designed for the Duramax, which is Hydro Boost, which uses your power steering pump through these ports here to give you power brakes, not vacuum. I'm not sure yet, but I may be able to use the original master cylinder and just bolt it directly to this. I'll have to see if it lines up or not. But if not, I have the master cylinder that came with this one. But this slides right in where the old vacuum booster went. You can see all the studs line right up. So my brake pedal will hook directly onto this push rod right here, and it's identical push rod that's on the vacuum booster. Look at there, guys, looks familiar. Same thing. Like I mentioned, it's like to like, Chevy to Chevy, early 2000s. A lot of the stuff is the same. So that's some of the updates I have. I also have the oil pan still on its way here. Then I can start welding in mounts and give you guys another video there. But all the pieces are starting to come together. It's very exciting. I'm really happy to get things rolling on this thing. I'm really excited the idea of getting it finally bolted in. That's the hardest part, is locating the engine, setting it in place. The rest is kind of easy. So I'm hoping this winter to have this thing on the road, cruising and listening to the beautiful Duramax music. If you're curious what kind of tools we're using to work on this or any other car in the shop, check our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. Also check out Mrs. Wizard's Way in the description below. She's got her link there, a lot of cool videos there. And make sure to hit the subscribe button here as well, because you want to keep up on the Duramax swap. And I'm also getting some things done on the bus and tons of other videos for you guys. Thanks for watching.